All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome to this explainer where we're going to unpack an absolutely incredible story about misfit underdogs, extraordinary superpowers, and, honestly, the ultimate meaning of found family. We're looking at a narrative that takes your classic superhero trope and just completely flips it on its head. Forget the billionaire playboys and the alien gods, right? We're swapping them out for a group of kids who just can't seem to fit in anywhere. I mean, think about it. What actually makes a hero? Is it crazy government experiments, or is it something you're just born with? Today, we are breaking down the fascinating lore of Team Zenith, looking at the completely destructive nature of artificially enhanced powers, and seeing how a washed-up, super cynical former hero manages to find his purpose again through the most unlikely trainees you could possibly imagine.
So, picture this. Imagine an ordinary world completely unaware of massive interdimensional threats that is suddenly relying on a handful of children. Now, what's really interesting here is the question that this setup poses. We're not talking about highly trained soldiers. We're talking about kids who are treated as total outcasts simply because they're a little bit different. In this story, the fate of the entire world doesn't rest on the broad shoulders of traditional heroes. It literally rests on kids who get bullied at the local pool or mocked during their lunch break. It creates this absolutely fascinating dynamic where their vulnerabilities, their everyday insecurities, are just as crucial to the story as their superhuman abilities.
All right, let's get into Chapter 1, Superpowered Misfit Kids.
So let's meet the kids at the very center of this storm. They are an incredibly unique bunch, mostly just trying to navigate the already super awkward phases of childhood and adolescence, And they treat their powers way more like an annoying burden than a gift. The absolutely crucial point here is that these kids were born with their powers. They were not made in a lab. Let's break down this roster really quick. We've got Dylan, a teenager who can turn completely invisible and possesses something called mind sight. Then, oh my gosh, there's little Cindy. She's just 6 years old, but she is packing some serious superhuman strength. We've got John, a 16-year-old girl with telekinesis, and finally, William, a teenager with the kind of strange ability to manipulate his size and literally enlarge parts of his own body. This whole natural-born aspect is so vital because, as you'll see in a minute, it heavily contrasts with the military's dangerous obsession with artificial enhancement.
And this genuinely brilliantly illustrates how their powers manifest in everyday life, which, spoiler alert, usually gets them into a lot of trouble. I mean, we see Cindy, this tiny 6-year-old, literally picking up a bully and throwing him into a tree. The onlookers are completely stunned, and her mom is deeply upset. Then we have Dylan, who's totally stressing over a Newton equation during a math test, and he just completely vanishes right in front of his shocked classmates. William uses his size manipulation to enlarge himself and totally splash the kids who are bullying him at the pool. And John? She uses her telekinesis to literally dump lunch all over the mean girls, calling her weird. These are wonderfully relatable, very human moments where incredible powers are basically just being used to solve everyday adolescent frustrations.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, The Fall of Team Zenith.
Okay, so to really understand why these kids are so important right now, we have to look back at the much darker history of the original superhero squad, Team Zenith. Let's walk through this timeline together because it honestly sets up the entire conflict. 30 years ago, Team Zenith was led by the speedster Captain Zoom, whose real name is Jack, by the way, and his brother, Concussion. But then, the government stepped in. They wanted more power, obviously, so they used Gamma-13 radiation to artificially boost the team. And while it did make Zoom way faster, the radiation completely corrupted his brother, Concussion. It turned him into this incredibly violent villain who just completely turned on his own teammates. To stop him, Zoom had to literally run fast enough to create a massive vortex. It trapped Concussion in a dimensional rift, but the sheer trauma and energy expenditure cost Zoom every ounce of his super speed. He lost his brother, his team, and his powers all in one fell swoop.
Which brings us to a terrifying revelation and a literal ticking clock. 12. Just 12. That is the exact number of days the world has left. Deep inside the super-secret Area 52 base, scientists like Dr. Grant and the incredibly ruthless General Larrabee discover that Concussion actually didn't die 30 years ago. Nope. He's survived inside that dimensional rift, and he is rapidly heading right back to Earth. They have less than 2 weeks before a supercharged, totally gamma-irradiated villain breaks out and destroys absolutely everything.
And that brings us to Chapter 3, Training at Area 52.
So this catastrophic threat forces the military to totally scramble to put together a new Team Zenith, led by none other than the original Captain Zoom. The only problem, Zoom is now just this super cynical guy named Jack who uses the absolute last remnant of his powers, which is just a wildly vibrating finger, to mix up banana shakes in his garage. He wants absolutely nothing to do with heroism. Honestly, he had to be shot with a tranquilizer dart by Dr. Grant's team just to get him to the base. Now here is where we see the absolute core ideological clash of this entire explainer. On one hand, you have General Larrabee. He views these kids as weapons, plain and simple. His approach is entirely clinical and forceful. He genuinely believes the only way to defeat Concussion is to inject these children with the exact same Gamma-13 radiation that completely ruined Jack's brother. On the other hand, we have Jack. As he starts to bond with the kids, his cynicism slowly fades away. He realizes, hey, these aren't soldiers, they're scared children. His training method evolves into one of empathy and patience. He starts treating them like a real family, which heavily opposes Larrabee's dangerous artificial shortcuts.
And we actually see Jack's empathetic approach yield some pretty incredible results. There's this specific breakthrough moment with Dylan, who, by the way, is constantly trying to escape the facility. Instead of punishing him like the military constantly does, Jack actually sits him down and helps him focus. He guides Dylan to use his mind to locate John somewhere within the massive base, and Dylan succeeds. He projects his vision to see John just hanging out in her room. Jack tells him this is his true power, mind sight, and that a real leader uses internal focus to guide their team. He proves that actual, real strength comes from within, not from some sketchy syringe of gamma radiation.
Through experiences like this, they really start to form a bond. And this brilliantly illustrates that they aren't just becoming some tactical military unit, they are becoming a real found family. Jack takes the kids joyriding in a secret spaceship with his old robot friend Peeb. It's hilarious. Later, when 6-year-old Cindy has this absolutely terrible nightmare and begs to stay with Jack, he realizes her parents literally abandoned her to the military. He finally steps up to comfort and protect her. The kids even start showing this shared rebellious streak, right? They completely mess with the control panels to turn a sterile, boring training room into this chaotic, joyous rain and snowstorm. They're actually finding joy and real connection in a place that was explicitly designed to turn them into weapons.
But, Chapter 4. The gamma radiation threat.
Yeah, so of course, the heartwarming moments just can't last forever. The tone shifts drastically as time starts running out. General Larrabee is super unimpressed with Jack's whole family-building exercise. He firmly believes the kids aren't physically strong enough to face concussion, so the military decides it's time to take matters into their own hands. They are prioritizing raw, irradiated power over genuine growth. Knowing Larrabee is plotting something awful, Jack's protective instincts totally kick into high gear. He explicitly tells Dr. Marcia, who's the head researcher and actually a massive fan of his, that he absolutely does not want these kids repeating his old team's fatal mistakes. So Jack throws this secret party for the kids in his old hangout spot just to solidify their bond before everything goes south. And here, they reject the sterile code names the military gave them, and they choose their own identities. Dylan becomes Houdini, William is Megaboy, John chooses Wonder, and little Cindy names herself Princess. They are, for sure, finally a true family.
But then, disaster strikes. Dylan uses his mind sight and has a completely terrifying vision of Larrabee prepping the Gamma-13 doses for the very next morning. When Jack rushes in to confront Larrabee, the general just calmly throws Jack into a special holding cell. The kids are all rounded up by the guards, but here's the thing. They aren't helpless anymore. In a wonderfully tense escape sequence, they break out, and they get some wildly unexpected help from Dr. Marcia, who reveals she isn't just a scientist, she actually has superpowers too. She uses her super breath to completely blast the guards away, which allows the kids to break Jack out of his cell, hijack the spaceship, and flee Area 52.
Which launches us into Chapter 5, the final showdown.
This great escape leads us directly into our final conflict, and the stakes seriously couldn't be any higher. With concussion actively breaking through the dimensional rift, Jack, Marcia, and the kids realize they can't just run away forever. They have to face the sins of the past. It's time for the ultimate showdown, and they are relying not on military weapons, but on the quirky, natural abilities they finally learned to embrace. Let's break down the mechanics of this climax, because it requires absolutely perfect teamwork to pull off. Step 1. Concussion emerges, furious, and just insanely powerful. John asks Peeb, the robot, and the rest of the kids to distract Concussion and keep him completely off balance. Step 2. Jack, back in his old Captain Zoom suit, realizes exactly what he must do. He starts running in a super tight circle to generate a massive vortex. Step 3. William knocks Concussion into position, and Marcia unleashes a massive gust of her super breath, blowing the villain directly into the center of the spinning vortex. Every single unique ability of that team was absolutely necessary to make this work. But the true emotional peak of this entire story happens right in the middle of all this chaos. Earlier in the fight, the military arrives and General Larrabee fires an experimental weapon called a sonic net at Concussion, but Concussion easily deflects it, sending the deadly net flying straight toward little 6-year-old Cindy. She is absolutely terrified, crying out for Jack. And in that exact split second, driven by just pure paternal love and the desperate need to protect his new family, Jack's mental block completely shatters. His lost superspeed returns in a flash. He moves so incredibly fast that he swoops in and saves Cindy right before the net hits her.
With his speed fully restored, Jack pushes the vortex to the absolute limit, creating a mega vortex. But here, right here, is the most beautiful part of the whole story. This isn't about destroying the villain at all. The intense energy of the mega vortex actually strips away the toxic Gamma-13 radiation from Concussion's body. The curse is reversed. Concussion is healed, reverting right back into the good man and the loving brother he was 30 years ago. They didn't just win a fight, they saved the soul. and they prove definitively that Jack's family-first approach was infinitely stronger than Larrabee's clinical military weapons.
And that, my friends, brings us to the end of our explainer. Jack, Concussion, Marcia, and the kids form a brand new, healthy Team Zenith. They're living happily and using their powers to help others on their own terms. It leaves us with something really powerful to think about, right? True strength doesn't come from forcing yourself to be something you're not, or from artificial enhancements. It comes from accepting your quirks, finding your people, and focusing your energy on protecting them. So, I leave you with this provocative thought. How would you use your own unique abilities to protect your family? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. And remember, keep embracing exactly what makes you different.